Okay, we are recording.
All right. So, Chris, would you like to call the meeting to order?
Yes, I would. This is the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District Finance Committee meeting on October 20th, 2020 at 10 o'clock a.m. On a declaration of electronic meeting, for background, the Chapter 1283 of the Virginia 2020 Acts of Assembly addresses the ability of soil and water conservation districts to hold electronic meetings without the need for quorum being present in a single location when a state of emergency has been declared pursuant to Section 44-146(17) of the Code of Virginia. Soil and Water Conservation District should make the following determination by motion and vote on the record at the start of any electronic meeting. I make a motion that the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors has determined the nature of the declared COVID-19 virus emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for us to assemble in a single location for the purposes of transaction business statutorily required or necessary for us to continue operations and discharge our lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, John. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? So the motion carries, and therefore we're having a legal meeting. The next on the agenda, have you added anything more to the agenda since you sent it out?
No, I have.
That we can talk about in open session?
I do not. Well, I do have a couple of things that we can talk about in open session toward the end, a couple of new endeavors and information that I think would be pertinent to the Finance Committee awareness and things that we'll bring up next week as well at the board meeting. We can either do that now or we can hold off and do that toward the end.
Would any of those issues be, applicable to what we're going to discuss in closed session?
In part, yes, they will be because it's future considerations. So,
are you ready to do them first?
Sure, I can absolutely talk about it.
Excuse me.
Oh, go ahead.
We also need to approve the minutes of the September 21st Finance Committee meeting at some point.
Okay, let's do that. I've read the minutes have no changes and move that we accept them as prepared.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Yeah. Aye.
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 Motion carries. Okay, we got that out of the way. Thanks, Heather. I would have done it if it was on the minute.
What's that again? I'm sorry.
I would have moved to accept the minutes if it had been on the agenda.
No, that's fine. So the one thing I did want to just mention to everyone and just bring everybody up to speed. This has been a topic that's come up during the technical review committee several times, and it's the establishment of a local stormwater management assistance fund. As some of you might recall, several years ago there was the General Assembly passed a bill that allowed localities to establish a local assistance fund, very similar to the state local assistance fund for stormwater management. But what that fund allows is the ability for localities to utilize, through the use of this fund, monies that can be used for stormwater management enhancements on private properties. So when that law passed, or when that bill passed, I sent out a couple of emails to DPWES as well as Land Development Services and said, here's an opportunity we should really take into consideration. So back in September of 2019, the Stormwater Planning Division did convene a work group to talk about the feasibility of establishing a program like this. And as you might recall, that was really the first year where we established our process and protocol for the VCAP program. But we talked a lot about utilizing that foundation of the VCAP program as a means for implementing this Stormwater Local Assistance Fund. Well, I'm very excited to say that the county is interested in moving forward on that. So they have developed a memorandum that will be coming from Brian Hill, the county executive, to the Board of Supervisors, suggesting the establishment of a stormwater local assistance fund, or what they're calling local stormwater management grant program. But it essentially is dedicated funding to support the implementation of the VCAP and CAP program, at least into the foreseeable future. So the county is suggesting putting aside $300,000 for that program for essentially capital improvement projects, which would double our program, certainly. Right now, and this is something that I want to talk with them a little bit more about in terms of the need, but essentially they're looking at roughly 10% of those funds being dedicated to staff support as well. I'm thinking we need to revisit that and what the needs would be in order to double the implementation requirements for our program. But what this does do is gives us an opportunity to have a dedicated source of funding and being able to really allocate it in a way that works toward targeting communities, targeting those areas that would benefit most from the water quality benefit, and having a little bit more control. This is a start, and I think in the conversation that we had with stormwater planning, and this includes the director of stormwater planning, is that there are opportunities again to use the platform of VCAP to support a wide variety of other local concerns too, including stream bank stabilization and enhanced tree and forest programs as well as supporting in the future the maintenance responsibilities of a number of communities with their stormwater management facilities too. So that side of it isn't as well fleshed out yet, and those will be future conversations that we will have. But this is a great start for us to be able to have a dedicated funding source, be able to rely a little bit more on some funding, and knowing that we can move forward with our programs and have some of that dedicated funding there and available, and also again, just help to meet some of the demand that we have coming through our community.
Laura, is that $300,000 over a period of time, or is it annually?
It would be annually. It would be essentially, if this is approved through the county's budgeting process, it would be available to us in FY22. So that's what stormwater planning is looking at, essentially carving off this portion of funding and having it available in July of FY22.
Is that funding through the stormwater utility?
It would be. Mm-hmm. We've the last technical review committee meeting, we also talked a little bit about identifying some support for this current program year as well. And we've been looking and having some conversations with stormwater planning as well as land development services on some different options that they have. And we'll probably be bringing some information forward to the board for their consideration, and hopefully, if it makes sense, and we still have some conversations that need to take place between those organizations, but be able to have some funds available for projects in this current fiscal year as well. So stay tuned. It's a pretty exciting time, and certainly want to make sure that as we think about these new funds coming in, how does it help? What do we really need? And at this point, I haven't had a chance to kind of sit down and think about what would it take to really implement those funds. And there may need to be some potential restructuring of the work and our personnel in order to make that happen. But it's very exciting. It's very exciting.
And it's somewhat, well, it is sort of an independent funding source with the stormwater, but I know that the county is really looking at ways to save money right now. So getting extra funding just out of the blue was pretty good. So I assume you had a lot of various conversations with that. Was that you lobbying or them coming to you?
Well, it started with, hey, here's an opportunity coming from me. and we don't with the idea of let's really think about this and what needs to be done. But before you start to think about something brand new, understand what's currently in play right now. And so sharing the work of the VCAP program and of CAP. And I would say again, because we've structured the VCAP program the way that we have, it makes it very and because we've had the data to be able to say, this is what we've got, this is the general average of the number of projects that we're putting forward every year, this is the general amount of cost share that we're able to that we're requesting from the state. These are the challenges at the state level that we currently have with being able to make sure that those projects come and that we have that funding available. It was a lot of those conversations and just bringing the reality of the program to the table. Also listening to what the future needs are of the county and understanding and recognizing if there's a way of translating some of those needs into the program that we have. I think again for this year or for FY22, it is let's just get the funding source set. Let's maintain the program we have and revisit this from time to time to see whether or not there's opportunities for enhancement into the future.
Are you envisioning larger sums of monies for larger projects?
Possibly, if we keep it within the framework of the VCAP program, which I would recommend. Maybe we can take a look and give us some space to look at some of the different needs for our specific area. But right now our program's working. And so I don't know if we would need to really open it up too much to anything. I think it's where I see with having that large scale amount of funds is that we'll be looking at well, we need to kind of go back and prioritize what we want to spend some of those funds on. And those will be some of the conversations that we can have. If it's prioritizing more of those places of worship and homeowners associations, those do tend to be larger projects. If it's looking at the smaller scale and wanting to really focus in on flood prone areas, for example, it's a lot of smaller projects, but concentrated. So there's some opportunity there. So,
yeah, because $300,000 is $65,000 projects, and that's a lot to manage.
It is. So just to put it in perspective, every year we usually have about $150,000 worth of cost share that we request from the state, give or take, plus the $37,000 that we receive through the EIP funds. So we're looking at a program of about $180,000. That's with our current resources. And again, looking at 50 projects, 50 site visits, which tend to result in about 30 projects. So when we think about it from that kind of what does it take to really run a program where we're doubling the amount of funding that we may be putting forward, that's where we need to kind of perhaps go and scratch our heads a little bit. But we are looking at a dedicated source of technical assistance funds as well that would come along with that. So really what we're talking about is $300,000. What the county is seeing is 10% of those funds would be allocated to district staff for administration and management. So that's about $30,000.
Right.
So still some things that we need to think about in regards to that.
Very nice work.
Yeah, so it's exciting stuff.
No,
so,
I was referring to you getting it.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we're headed in the right direction. This is a number of years kind of in the making. And I think that the VCAP program as a whole, it's hard to believe, but I'll be celebrating 8 years with the organization in November. And Heather's 7 years in the organization just this past September. And even though we've got a lot of traditional programs, this is something new. And I'm very proud of the way that it's come around. And I think we've had some great team members and team effort moving it forward. So it's great. But putting it in perspective, the state program, the governor has allocated $500,000 to that program every year. So we're talking the equivalent of the state program. It takes a little pressure off of us from having to compete for those funds. It also takes a little pressure off the state program so that they can allocate those funds as they see necessary. So there's positive aspect to that. I also want to make sure as we're moving forward that we can continue to share our experience so that if the state is, sees, I know that they lean on us quite a bit in terms of trying to advocate for some of those funds. We can still continue to recognize that the demand is still going to far exceed whatever available funding that we have. Some good things.
Well, let me ask you a question before we leave that subject.
Sure.
Have we heard of any other counties that are looking at doing what Fairfax is doing in terms of using local funds to fund private projects?
Yes. So down in the city of Harrisonburg does have a relationship with the Shenandoah Valley Soil and Water Conservation District, and they've diverted some funds specifically for projects within the city of Harrisonburg. So there is some of those kinds of relationships that are taking place as well, which is fantastic. The city of Charlottesville has done the same thing with the Thomas Jefferson Soil and Water Conservation District, and I want to say Albemarle County may have also established a similar kind of relationship with them. So there is the potential, again, with the volatility of the state funding, there are some ways of being able to do it. For example, in city of Charlottesville, the way that they've kind of set up their program is that the city covers up to a certain amount and then VCAP covers the rest. There's some pros and cons to doing it that way that I see. Again, you're dependent upon the state's process, which can really delay the moving forward of projects. So I think if we maintain our program the way that we've done CAP, where the approval process is within, goes through the RTRC and goes through our board for ultimate approval and allocation of funding, then, that's really helpful. That's really helpful. So I also have some conversations going on with the city of Fairfax and the city of Alexandria. Those projects in those areas would still go through the state program. They would not be part of this funding stream, but they are interested in exploring opportunities as well. So stay tuned on that.
Providing more money than just the state.
Correct.
Excellent. I'm so glad to see this is finally happening. After that law was passed, it's like, okay, let's do something. And now it's happening.
And I mean, really, we're only talking about a year. This has been this conversation's been taking place. But I think we've learned a lot over the last 2 years in regards to how our program works and what our needs are. And I think with having that information, we're able to know what we're asking and feel confident that we'll be able to capitalize on those funds and move them forward. So it's good stuff.
Good. Did you have something else while we're still open?
I do not. That was the big thing. So again, next week when we have our board meeting, I do want to just make sure that we bring this up and make folks aware. It is not a commitment at this point in regards to if those funds became available and we realize, I don't know if we would really do this, but we were like, we don't want them. There is that commitment is not there. And it does still have to go through the budget process and be approved ultimately by the Board of Supervisors for those funds to be allocated to the program. But I do foresee that it's going to be, so we'll just have to kind of keep our fingers crossed. But right now it's informational and a good information.
But it could happen by for the next fiscal year.
Correct.
21.
Correct.
That's great.
Okay. I think it's time to enter into closed session. So the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation Finance Committee will enter into closed session to discuss the following items as allowed by the Code of Virginia, Section 2.2-3711A1, and we'll be discussing staff salaries. So we're now in closed session.
We just need to make a motion, so
Oh, okay.
I'll second that for you.
Okay, I thought I could actually say it, but all right.
No, that's okay. And we'll just do a vote.
Okay, that's a motion. Laura, second. All in favor? I don't know. if
Heather
John's-
said aye, but she was muted.
John, motion on the floor to go into closed session to discuss salaries.
I'll second the motion. I was having trouble unmuting. I don't know what's going on with my WebEx today.
It is said you've had low bandwidth and you zipped out, and I thought you were lost, but your name still was up there.
Yeah, I'm not lost, but I do have to leave at 11. However, I've got another teleconference with the new state conservationist in Virginia.
Right, Laura had mentioned. Heather voted aye. Laura voted aye. John?
I voted aye.
Okay, so now we're in closed sessions. The motion passed.
Well, I'm going to just read the certificate of closed meeting. We passed a motion at 12:44. Whereas the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District has convened a closed meeting on October 22nd pursuant to an affirmative recorded vote and in accordance with the provisions of the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. And whereas Section 2.23712 of the Code of Virginia requires a certification by the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District that a closed meeting was conducted in conformity with the Virginia law. Now therefore be it resolved that the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District hereby certify that to the best of each member of our Finance Committee's knowledge, only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting requirements by Virginia law were discussed in the closed meeting to which this certification resolution applies, and only such public business matters as identified in the motion convening the closed meeting were heard, discussed, or considered by the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District's Finance Committee. So with that, that's a motion that I will make. And so we'll just need a second.
Okay. I second it.
Okay.
All in favor? Heather?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. Now, is there any other business?
Do we need to list the recommendation that came out of the closed session?
I don't know, because it's salary discussion specifically. Because we're going to discuss it in closed sections in the board meeting, right? What happened? The whole screen changed. Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
just took a
Laura, stop sharing her screen.
Literally, we'll need to edit a portion of that of the video here. Yes, we can, I guess the recommendations that we are going to want to make to the board, we can have them. I guess. Let me ask this question, Chris. Do you want to take this conversation to the executive committee prior to the board meeting?
I think we have to. It's not appropriate to talk about in an open board meeting, is it?
No, not staff salaries and personnel. But if we want to make our recommendation to adjust salaries per the conversation that we had in our closed session, we could make that recommendation. But I think that it would be a good idea to bring it up in executive committee and in closed session, and so that way everybody else is aware. Because
you make it a board meeting, Dan and Ashley suddenly are known to get a raise.
Well, remember we're recording this right now, so that's
sorry.
no, but yes,
no, $1 each doesn't have that big a deal.
So we could make the motion a little bit more general, but I do think it's a great idea to bring this up in executive committee session so that those details can be clarified, and then at the board meeting make the recommendations for the adjustments discussed during closed session.
Yes, that's what I assumed would happen. Okay. I'll do that.
So our recommendation will be to just bring this to the executive committee and then ultimately to the board for recommendations regarding the salary adjustments that we discussed in closed session today.
Correct.
This is the only part where Heather has to take, where we have to take notes. So
We can hear her clicking away.
Yeah.
So
Okay, if there's no other things to discuss, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Heather, do you want to make?
I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll
Would
second.
you like to? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Laura, I didn't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Aye.
Okay, motion carries. So we're adjourned.
Okay.
Bye,
Thank you
everybody.
very much.
Have a good afternoon. I think it's still warm out there.
I think so.
I think it is.
Nice.
Bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.